our lesson today, if you go with me to Genesis chapter 28, verse 10. Genesis chapter 28, verse 10. Genesis 28, verse 10 says, "Now Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran. So he came to a certain place and stayed there all night, because the sun had set. And he took one of the stones of that place and put it at his head, and he laid down in that place to sleep. Then he dreamed, and behold, a ladder was set up on the earth, and its top reached to heaven. And there the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to your descendants, to you and your descendants. Also your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and the east, to the north and the south. And in you and in your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Then Jacob rose early in the morning and took the stone that he had put at his head, and set it up as a pillar, and poured oil on top of it. And he called the name of that place Bethel. But the name of that city had been Luz previously. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me and keep me in this way that I am going, and give me bread to eat and clothing to put on, so that I come back to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up as a pillar shall be God's house, and of all that you give me I will surely give a tenth to you." We need that background for what we're going to read today. Take your notes and the first page. Our Torah text today picks up again with the life of Yaakov as he leaves Laban and moves back to the land he left some 20 years earlier. At the opening of chapter 32, we are informed that Yaakov encounters some angels of God at the place called Machanayim, which means two camps. The word for camps can refer to just a plain settlement of people or to the camp of an army. In order to better understand why I believe that Yaakov encounters, and this word also has military possibilities, angels, we must digress back into Genesis 1. It is my belief that as Moshe writes the opening chapters of Genesis, he desires for the Israelites to see that the Garden of Eden and the land of Canaan, where they will dwell, are one and the same, or at least closely related. A comparison of the description of Eden in Genesis 2, 10 through 14, and the land promised to Abraham in Genesis 15, 18, share a similar description. After the disobedience of Adam, God drives him from Eden and places cherubim at the east side to prevent the re-entry of Adam and Havah. The connection of Eden with the promised land is strengthened by the description of Israel's exodus from Egypt found in Deuteronomy 32, 10 and 11. Go with me there if you would. Deuteronomy 32. Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verse 10 and 11 says this. He found him in a desert land and in the wasteland a howling wilderness. He encircled him. He instructed him. He kept him as the apple of his... How many of your translations say apple of his eye? How many has the apple of his eye? 1, 2, wow, a lot. Okay. The text actually says something very interesting. It says it uses a diminutive term for the word for man. It says keeps him as the little man of the eye, because when you look at another person's eye standing right in front of them, your reflection is in their pupil. So it's as if the reflection is so it translates that this. I mean, the Hebrew actually says who He keeps him as the little man of his eye. But they translate apple of his eye, but it's the reflection of that person in his eye. As an eagle stirs its nest, hovers over its young, spreading out its wings, taking them up, carrying them on its wings. So the Lord alone led them, and there was no foreign god with him. Notice that, okay? That is right after we had verse 8 of 32, which talks about God, when the Most High divided their inheritance to the nations, when he separated the sons of man, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the children of Israel. They translate children of Israel, it's the B'nai Elohim, the sons of God. For the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob is the place of his inheritance. Okay? Now, so middle of page 1 there. The language of these verses has an echo found in Genesis 1 and 2. Further strengthening is found when we remember that the tabernacle and the Garden of Eden were both very similar. It should not surprise us when we see Yaakov leaving and now returning to Canaan that he would encounter angels who are the guardians of God's people. The army of God the army of God's angels encamps around Israel to protect them from harm. Ross notes for us the multiple similarities between the encounter at Bethel, that is, Bethel means house of God, and our text. The expression messengers of God, found in 28:12, which we just read, is used here and nowhere else in the Hebrew Scripture. The expression met him occurs here and in 28:11 and 3. The pronoun this is used 4 times in 28, 16, and 17, and is used here in Yaakov's naming of this place. In both texts, Yaakov interpreted what he had seen before he names the place. A similar expression is used in naming both places. The similar echo of holek, that is to walk, plus the way, to walk in the way, found in 28:20 and used here again in 32:1. Thus, the careful reader of the text was meant to hear the similarity and echo of Yaakov's encounter at Bethel and remember that both events should be read in light of each other. The life of Yaakov should give us some comfort to know that the people of God are at all times protected by an army of God's emissaries. While these angels are not always seen, they are nevertheless present to protect those who belong to the Almighty. Perhaps it is to these angels that Hasatan refers to when he claims that Yov, has a hedge around him that keeps him from being touched by Satan. My point is that Yaakov encounters this camp of messengers in this dream. We see it in 28 as a dream. In 32, we see it when he's coming back into Canaan. He also, once again, encounters this entourage of Malach, these angels, who are there encamped. It would seem, then, that what we have, and I'm just putting this out there based on what we can see, that God has stationed at the borders of Israel, at least, at the very borders of Israel, an army of Malachim, an army of angels that protect those who are coming in and those who are going out. In other words, it keeps the wrong people out, so to speak, and lets the right people in. Okay? That's what I see happening here. Because you have in 28 this ladder that goes up and down, and he encounters it there as he's leaving, and then he encounters these Malachim again as he's coming back. They seem to have stayed there. Any questions about what I'm saying here? I think at the borders of Israel that we have an army, and he calls it this Machanayim, 2 camps. He sees this ladder going up and down. God is standing at the top of the ladder, and these angels are going up and down. It seems to be an entrance place for these angels to come in and out. One of those places where they can move in and out, and then he encounters them again in chapter 32. Yes?
Is this within the borders of Israel today? Or is it the West Bank?
I'd have to look. Boy, I need to before I said exactly on a map where it's found, I would need to yeah, Robin. Yeah, movable borders. The angels are certainly capable of moving. as evidenced by the fact that they're going up and down on the ladder. Their access is uninhibited, so they're able to move up and down. So, yeah, as to your question, Gary, I would need to try to pinpoint where we're at on the map specifically to see if it's within modern borders of Israel. Interesting question. Hold on just a second. Wait, just a second. First, go ahead. She was first. Go ahead. The synonymous, because the word malach, which we translate as angels, we got the word angels from the Greek text, angelos. So angelos and malach Hebrew, are both the idea as messengers. So we say angels. Angels just sounds a little fancier, but they're really messengers who come from this realm, from the upper realms. So right. Right. I just, yeah, I would prefer messengers because that's what it means. Although when you say messengers, then people go, "Are you talking about angels?" Yeah, okay, I'm talking about angels. So I end up coming back to that. But bottom line is that it's messengers. That's what angelos means. That's what malach means. Bill.
Yeah, it's even better with geopolitical words than they are. The words of Israel are much greater than what we see today.
Yeah.
I don't think we even know where the actual word will be.
Yeah, if you take the area that Abraham officially is given, it's a much bigger area than what we'd say now geopolitically, to be sure. So I just think it's fascinating, though, that you have, in light of our past discussions, what we're seeing in 28 and in 32 is that when Yaakov leaves, he encounters this army, and when he comes back, he encounters this same army of angels. He has two encounters with this angelic host, with this army of messengers, and both times as he's at near the same place, he has bumped into this camp, so to speak, on two occasions. Okay? Chapter 28, he goes into a dream and sees this ladder going up and down. He says, "This is the gate of heaven. This is a place where they can enter in and go out. It's a gate." What about a gate to Eden? I don't think it's a gate to Eden because, in fact, the cherubim are placed at the entrance to Eden to keep anybody from going in there. And who are these cherubim? See, we don't find out who they are until we get to the tabernacle in Leviticus, and he says, okay, you need to understand who these cherubim are. But in fact, we're not really given a description of the cherubim until we get to the prophetic texts, where then it talks about the fact that they are around the throne of God, protecting the throne of God, so to speak, this holiness of God. And we have both cherubim, seraphim, that protect the holiness of God. The seraphim being burning ones. Not exactly sure what cherubim means, although we do know that the one in Genesis 3 has a sword. So again, this one is, and it's we have later on we see there's flaming swords. So fire issues from this throne of God, and we have this chariot army of God, and they must be able to encamp here on the ground. Because that's what Yaakov encounters while he's traveling back and forth, crossing borders. All right. Bottom of page 1. The opening to verse 4 has the words Seir, Sadeh, and Edom, all which recall the past hostilities between Yaakov and his brother Esau. Esau, the man covered with hair, Sa'ar, a man who hunts outdoors, Sadeh, field, and who has a ruddy complexion, Admoni, ruddy, is the one who comes from the field, Sadeh, and begs Yaakov for some red stuff, Adom, and whose hairiness, Sa'ir, plays a crucial part in the deception that initiates Yaakov's departure. Nearing the land where Esau is now living, Yaakov sends out an advance party to let Esau know that he is in the area and that his intentions are good. The advance party comes back with no direct word from Esau and the information that he is coming to meet Yaakov with 400 men. The word to meet can depend on the context, meaning to meet in war, and the 400 men is the size elsewhere in Hebrew scripture of a military militia. You can see the references. The combination of all that Yaakov hears and doesn't hear lead him to the conclusion that his brother is still angry enough to kill him after all these years. Throughout this narrative, Yaakov will refer to himself as your servant and to Esau as my lord, while Esau will use the familial term brother when addressing Yaakov. Yaakov teaches all of us a lesson here. Without a complete reliance on our God, we will inevitably misread the situations in our lives and live in fear of the future. Read that line again. Without a complete reliance on our God, we will inevitably misread the situations in our lives and live in fear of the future. It is only those who have their faith firmly planted in the providence of God that can look confidently at the future and know that despite what looks like that which will destroy is only there to help. The irony is that Esau has had a change of heart towards his brother, and the 400 men coming with him were there to protect Yaakov as he entered the land. Yaakov had been privileged to encounter the messengers of God at the beginning to bolster his faith that God was there to protect him, but his eyes were directed more toward his brother than to the God who could destroy even his brother. Esau is the progenitor of the Edomites, who God would ultimately destroy, as we shall see later in a look at the prophetic section of our text, which is why we read the book of Obadiah, which deals with the Edomites. The first action of Yaakov upon hearing the news of his brother's imminent arrival is to divide his camp into two groups, and thus copying what he had seen in the two camps of the angels. Machanaim, two camps. More on the specifics and rationale of this later. Robert Alter notes that a binary division runs throughout the life of Yaakov. Two twin brothers struggle over a blessing that cannot be had. Two sisters struggle over a husband's love. Two shepherds struggle over the same sheep, and now Yaakov's family is divided into two camps. Jacob, or Yaakov, like many of us, is a man who can at times show great faith and then turn around and let his fears get the best of him. I do see, however, in Yaakov a man who has matured in his faith as we progress in the narratives about him. One cannot help but be impressed with the prayer of Yaakov that he offers to God in verses 10 to 13. Yaakov first makes mention of the covenant that God had established with his grandfather and ratified with his father. It is my contention that prayer should always have the element of God's word in it. God longs to see his children come to rest in the promises he has given. This prayer, however, not only focuses on the past, but moves on to the present with implications for the future. Yaakov acknowledges that he left home with nothing but his staff, and now he returns a very wealthy man. Here again is the maturing of Yaakov in that he confesses that all he has comes from the gracious hand of God. Would that all of us could see the truth that all we have is directly from the gracious hand of God also. Yaakov realizes that there is no merit in and of himself that warrants God's protection, but falls upon the covenant promise of God to raise up a people too numerous to count. Always with the one with the plan to make things work. Remember what I said, he vacillates. Yaakov prepares to pacify his brother with gifts. The Hebrew word is minkah. The Hebrew word for camps and gifts share a similar sound. Page 3. Do I have the right page? Thank you. I missed up. My thing must have. Okay. Hold on here. Yeah, here we go. Hold on just a second. There we go. All right. I'm back on. Thank you. Here, you can have that back. Sorry about that. So the Hebrew words for camp and gift in Hebrew create fun word plays. veiled somewhat in translation is Yaakov's use of what will later be used in sacrificial texts. The word mincha could refer to a grain offering in Leviticus 2, and this gift is seen by Yaakov as something that would appease, that is Kippur, his brother, and allow him to be accepted. The total number of animals that Yaakov planned to give his brother amount to 550 animals. We are left wondering if this gift is just a conventional courtesy, since preparation gifts were often sent ahead in the Near East, or if Yaakov is returning the blessings he had stolen from Esau. Ross has noted that the word for face, Hebrew panim, is used frequently in verses 21 and 22. Verse 21 reads, I will cover his face, that is, appease, with the gift that is going before me, lifnei, which is also built off the word face. And afterward I will see his face. Perhaps he will lift up my face, idiomatic for forgiveness or acceptance. In verse 22, he sent the gift over before him, al panav, but he lodged that night in the camp. This abundance of face terminology foreshadows the future when Yaakov will see Elohim panim el panim, that is, face to face, and name the place Peniel, the face of God. A lot of this thing going on here with the term face. The night before Yaakov reunites with Esau, he has an altercation that will change his life forever. Having sent his family across the stream of the Jabbok, night falls, and he is left alone to wrestle with a man. The word for wrestle is avak. It is similar in consonants with the Jabbok, and the name Yaakov, creating puns and assonants, similar sounds. Exactly who this man is has caused no small matter of interest. In verse 25, he is termed a man, while verse 29 and 31 refer to him as Elohim. While Elohim could refer to the one true God of Israel or to angels, the text before us has Yaakov believing he has seen God face to face. Hosea 12:3 and following is insightful in this regard. This is where we get into looking at the prophets, because they're now looking back at this text. So we're going internal into the biblical text to look at a commentary on this. This is what Hosea says about our text. He says, in the womb he grasped his brother's heel. As a man he struggled with Elohim. He struggled with the angel and overcame him. He wept and begged his favor. He found him at Bethel and talked with him there. The Lord God Almighty. The Lord is his name of renown. Okay, this is Hosea's looking back at what's happened here and saying, here's what we're dealing with. First, so several factors seem to point to the fact that Yaakov wrestled with Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. First, Yaakov is surprised that after seeing this man that he is still alive. The popular notion among the Israelites is that one could not see God and live. Yaakov is convinced that he has seen God. Secondly, the fact that his name is changed is elsewhere something that God does and not angels. Finally, the text of Hosea connects the encounter. The text of Hosea relates and connects the encounter, should be at Bethel, and this wrestling at the ford of the Jabbok as none other than Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. As Yaakov wrestles with the man, he touches him in the thigh. Isaiah 6:7 shows that this powerful a touch emanates from God. While the exact location of the thigh is debatable, I believe that the thigh is a euphemism for the male organ of procreation. In a linguistic study of the Hebrew words translated hand of the thigh and sinew of the hip, Stanley Gewirtz has shown that both of these phrases refer to the male organs. The fact that it would be another 10 years before Yaakov would have another child may lend credence to this interpretation. I think he got a hold of him on the sign of the covenant. He wrestles with a man. And I believe the man he wrestles with is none other than Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, who's called a man, who's called an Elohim, and then Hosea interprets it and says, that was Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, who he wrestled with. In case you didn't know it, Hosea gives us quite a good deal of clarity to say, that was Yahweh he was messing with. Yes, yes. Yes, it's Yeshua on the ground. Yeah, it has to be Yeshua on the ground. That's what I'm saying. It's Yeshua, but we can call him a man. We can call him Elohim, and we can call him Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and we can call him Angel of the Lord. We can call him any one of those four things, Adonai. They can all be in the text. Right. We didn't look at it last week. I don't think we looked at it last week, and I'll go there. Let's go there now. Judges chapter 13. Just for a second. This one is interesting because you see all three, or actually see more than all three. Here you have, if you look at Judges chapter 13, she tells her husband, I've seen a man this is Manoah's wife. Her name is not given. Look at verse 9. Judges 13:9. This is one you ought to have pegged and kind of underlined just because of the multiplicity of references here. It says in verse 9, and God, which is Ha Elohim. Ha Elohim. So when the sages want us to know that we're dealing with, we have that article on the front there. It's Ha Elohim. So it says, and the God listened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God. Now here, Malach. Malach Ha Elohim. In the same verse, I just had Ha Elohim, and now Malach Ha Elohim. Came to the woman again as she was sitting in the field. Then the woman ran in haste and told her husband and said, look, the man. Now I got a man. Okay, he appears like a man. Who came to me the other day has just now appeared to me. So, skip down, verse 13. So the angel of the Lord. Now it's Malach Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh in verse 13. Okay. The angel of the Lord said to Manoah, and he speaks to him, verse 15. Then Manoah said to the angel of the Lord. Verse 16. And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah. Verse 17. Then Manoah said to the angel of the Lord. Verse 18 is interesting because, and the angel of the Lord said to him, why do you ask my name, seeing it is Pele? It's wonderful, which is one of Isaiah's descriptions of this son who is to come. He is Pele Yoetz. He is the wonderful counselor. And here he just uses the word Pele. Verse 18, then we go on down, and all the way through this, you have the angel of the Lord, and at verse 22, Manoah says, we shall surely die because we have seen Elohim. Okay. His wife says, no, if the Lord had desired to kill us, he wouldn't have promised us children. She gives them the rationale. Then look at verse 25. And the Spirit of the Lord began to move upon him. So the Ruach of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. So in this text, I have Ha Elohim, I have a man, I have Malach Adonai, angel of the Lord, and I have the Spirit of the Lord. Which one is it? Well, it's all of them. They're all the same. They're interchangeable. Bottom line is, somebody's seeing a man that they can touch, they can talk to, they can relate to. There's a physicality capacity here to relate. So that to me is amazing. Now, I think the fact that we have this here, we're seeing in Genesis 28 and Genesis 32, Jacob, as he's entering and leaving the land of Israel, encountering this army of God, and he's encountering this man. He encounters this man. And he wrestles with this man. And he says to this man, tell me your name. The man says, I'm not going to tell you my name, basically. Okay? Here again, people want to know his name. In Judges 13, he just says, it's Pele, it's wonderful. It's beyond you even understanding. Okay? So, any questions or comments about what we're dealing with here? I think we're talking about him dealing with, to me this is fascinating because here in Genesis 28 and 32, we're talking about Abraham finding and dealing with Yeshua. He finds this camp of the army of God, and he, in chapter 32, is forced to wrestle with and have his name changed by this man, by this Malach Adonai, this Elohim. And it's none other than Yeshua. He wrestles with Yeshua. And his name is changed from Yaakov to Yisrael, one who wrestles with God. Or there's a debate as to whether Israel means Yashar, the upright of God. There's a little play there between those two. Yeah, Robin.
You think that you would find Israeli border guards are there because Yeshua is there? He's always surrounded by them.
Yeah.
Go hand in hand.
Yeah, they go hand in hand. Wherever he is going to be, they are going to be there with him. And not that he couldn't separate from them and be okay. I will say this, wherever he goes, though, I believe an entourage goes with him. They want to be there. They are sent as, in a sense, guards around him. Not that he wouldn't be okay by himself, but again, they're always there. They're always going to be there with him. Read the apostolic scriptures with your eyes open to the angels, and every time that we talk about the appearance of God, you're going to have angels. This is going to be lost. To me, this is the sadness of this Advent season, is it's going to be lost on people. Luke chapter 2, where it talks about, and the heavenly hosts were there singing, and they're praising God, and there's glory to God in the highest. This is this angelic entourage there at his birth. Okay, when he comes in that form. And everywhere you look in the Gospels, there's this entourage that's just right at the heels. Sometimes they show up on the page and sometimes they don't. So, and at the very end of his life, what is he saying? He's saying things like, I'm coming back on a cloud with this army with me, and by the way, you couldn't take me if you wanted to. I could snap my fingers and they'd be here just in a heartbeat. And every now and then we see them touch down. Okay? But this army of God protects the people of God, certainly in the land of God. And then the book of Hebrews 13 expands that to say, that there's an angelic army that guards the people of God on a more geographical extension. But clearly they're there at the camp. They're at the borders of Israel. Okay, so they're on the mountain. We find in 2 Kings 6 they're on the mountains around Israel. They surround the mountains of Israel. Okay, so the prophet is able to say, I'm not worried about what any other army can do. And what I mean that this is, I'm not worried about him being on his own, obviously, even though the entourage is with him. We have this angel of the Lord who's able to take out 185,000 Assyrians in one night. So he's pretty capable on his own. Yeah, I believe so. Yes. I don't like the word portals, but okay. I think you're absolutely right. Her point was this, that if there are camps of these Malach Adonai that exist on this earth, and by the way, Jacob encounters them, he doesn't even plan on encountering them. That wasn't his plan. He's just trying to leave and come back. He bumps into them. And then in the dream, he's able to see them, and God reveals himself. And then this man wrestles with him and encounters him, and they wrestle all night. And finally, he's, okay, let me go. And God says, okay, I'm gonna let you go, but you'll never be the same, and I'm going to change your name. And this is going to be called Bethel, the house of God. And you're going to say, we're going to call this Peniel, because you've seen the face of God. So it's a bizarre encounter, the whole thing here going on. You're absolutely right, I think, to say that we have also enclaves of demonic forces that are here as well. They are here on the ground as well. They have strongholds in places and in people. Okay? They inhabit people as well. Use them as hosts. And we see that all through the Gospels, where people are hosting these forces. I think this is what we have, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. I didn't want to get into it today, but I think this is what we have in Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, where we have these kings of the earth, physical human kings that have demonic forces resident in them, which makes them maniacal. When you take a person who is a king or a leader, and they're inhabited by or used as a host by these demonic forces, they go maniacal. They get really weird. They start genociding people, their own people and other people. So hold on a second. One and then two. Go ahead first, and then we'll come to you. Go ahead. Okay, good point. Yes.
Simply don't understand all that stuff. We wouldn't understand if we saw it. And we're told in Scripture that we need often with angels unaware.
That's Hebrews 13, right.
So, yeah.
Right.
So it's just when you feel that we don't want it, we wouldn't understand it.
Yeah. Hold on 1 second. I'll come back to you. Go ahead.
She asked about modern times of serving angels. The Egyptians, in two different wars with Israel, saw angels in the sky, and the Assyrians also saw that in the Golan Heights.
Right. It's interesting. We have had numerous accounts of soldiers from the IDF who weren't believers when they've given their testimony, and from the other side of the enemy. Both sides saying that with regarding to fighting in Israel, we have the IDF saying it on their side, and we have those who are Israel's enemies on the other side saying they saw some type of force that was there. Well, yeah, I mean, describing things and kind of going, that's what made us back off, was that we saw some things that indicated there was more of you than there was of us. So, I mean, we've had those kind of stories from both sides where the Israelis and the enemy have both said, well, there was something going on here that was from another dimension. Okay? So, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, I think the caution that comes from my way of thinking is Daniel, where he says even Michael, when contesting for the body of Moses, was very, very cautious. I mean, so even those in that realm are very, very guarded as to how they deal. So I wouldn't go looking for this kind of stuff. That would be my. Let me hold off on the. I'll take 2 more questions, and then we'll go ahead, Rick. Go ahead. Right. Right. I would agree. Yeah, I think if you don't have the knowledge and the equipping to deal with that realm, then you're better to leave it alone. It's not a realm to just mess with. Yeah. Linda, go ahead. You had a question, or somebody over here? All right. Okay. Go back to the notes. Yes, go ahead. Skiva. Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah. You have in the gospel accounts the 7 sons of Sceva who go to do an exorcism, and they do this exorcism, and the demons literally beat them up. I mean, they just pummel them, and it's like messing in an area where you don't know what you're doing is a good way to get yourself in trouble. All right, bottom of the page. Since Yaakov has been hailed as the poster boy for polygamy, I want to make a few observations about the polygamy of Yaakov, since I have said his life was never the same after this encounter. Several lines of biblical evidence suggest that from this time forward, Yaakov forsook his polygamous lifestyle. Taking from the book Polygamy in the Bible by Ron Dupreez, we note several things that changed after this encounter. First, whereas prior to this encounter, the scripture repeatedly mentions Yaakov had relations with all 4 women, 2 wives, 2 concubines. After this change, there is no evidence of conjugal relations with anyone but Rachel. Second, during the next decade or so, the only woman who gives birth is Rachel. And the fact that none of the other women have any more children may imply that Yaakov no longer had relations with them. Third, whereas before the Jabbok experience, Yaakov had referred to both Rachel and Leah as my wives, afterward he calls only Rachel my wife. Furthermore, in his instructions to his sons concerning his burial, Yaakov states, "There they buried Abraham and his wife Sarah, and there they buried Yitzhak and his wife Rebekah, and there I buried Leah." When speaking of both Sarah and Rebekah, he mentions that they were wives, while failing to use this term in reference to Leah. Fourth, the genealogical listings in Genesis strongly suggest that after this event, Yaakov lived a life of monogamy. In Genesis 46, we are told that Leah, Zilpah, and Bilhah, quote, all bore to Yaakov children, while the text categorizes only Rachel as Yaakov's wife. While any one piece of the puzzle might not be much in and of itself, the collected close reading of the subsequent texts points to Yaakov as a man who lived a life of monogamy on his return to the land he had left. This lifestyle change shows Yaakov to be one who fulfills the desire of his father that he find a wife, and sets him in contrast to Esau, who marries foreign women just to agitate his parents. Just throw that out there for your consideration. Before we move on to Yaakov's meeting with Esau, let's address the meaning of the name Israel. Since Yaakov's name is changed to Israel, the etymology of Israel suggested by our text may come from the verbal root sarah, meaning to struggle or fight. If this were the case, the meaning of Israel could mean that God fights. The Greek translators of the Septuagint and the Latin Vulgate take the root of Israel from a different root, SRR, relating it to the idea of to rule or to be strong. Others, based on the poetic names of Israel as Yeshurun, claim that Yashar, meaning the straight or upright, is the correct etymology of the name Israel. Since the text before us has Yaakov wrestling with God, then the closest meaning is the first, that is, God fights. At the opening of chapter 33, we are informed that Yaakov looks up and sees Esau coming with 400 men. While some have seen the arrangement of Yaakov's family into groupings so that Rachel and Joseph would be killed last, or possibly escape, should there be a fight, I am more inclined to see that the ordering as one of importance. By placing Rachel and Joseph last, Yaakov is demonstrating that these two are of most importance to him. This is not lost on the brothers of Joseph later. The difference of Yaakov in both speech and actions makes much more sense if one understands that the present ordering is a matter of protocol. Yaakov himself is fearful of meeting up with Esau, and yet here he leads the way, showing that self-preservation is not his goal. Upon seeing Esau, Yaakov bows down 7 times as a way of showing respect for someone of great position. Both the Amarna letters and Ugaritic material show us that bowing 7 times was an acceptable custom afforded to wealthy rulers. As we noted earlier, Yaakov refers to Esau throughout as my lord, while his brother is much more casual, referring to Yaakov as my brother. This prostration of Yaakov directed toward Esau is an ironic twist on the words of Yitzhak. Years earlier, who said, "May nations bow down before you. May your mother's sons bow down before you." Sarna notes an interesting feature of verse 4 in relation to Esau's reaction upon seeing Yaakov. In Genesis 25:34, the breach in the relationship had started with 5 verbs used in succession. And here in this verse, at the point of their reconciliation, we again have the rapid firing of 5 verbs. This unusual cluster of verbs used in succession is done to demonstrate the importance of the moment, evidenced by the emotional energy spent. The first words between the 2 brothers are spoken by Esau, who asks, "Who are these," that is, people, with you? Alter points out that the phrase mi lecha, who to you, and the phrase ma lecha, what to you, can have the idiomatic meaning of what do you mean or what do you want. The second time Esau uses the phrase in verse 8, he does so with this idiomatic nuance in mind. Esau's question is designed to find out why Yaakov has returned after all these years, and to see if he too has had a change of heart. Unlike the Yaakov who had left wanting to take everything with him, this one returns and is willing to give away. Yaakov offers Esau the previously mentioned animals, 550 by count, as a way of showing that he has changed and perhaps as a way of buying off his brother. At first, in good Oriental fashion, Esau refuses to accept Yaakov's blessing, in quotes, which is the polite way of doing business. We've seen this before. We've seen this form of refusal before as we watched Abraham buy the cave he needed to buy Sarah, to bury Sarah. After much pleading by Yaakov, using 2 participles of entreaty back to back, Esau agrees to accept Yaakov's gift. After accepting the animals from Yaakov, Esau suggests that they travel together back to Seir, going south. Yaakov resists both the invitation to travel with his brother and the escort of men to protect him, saying that he is forced to travel slowly and would only hold up the pace of Esau's group. As soon as Esau leaves, we are informed that Yaakov turns northward and heads towards Sukkot, that is booths, and settles there, building a house and stalls for his cattle. Now I want to tie it up with Obadiah. Turning back to the book of Obadiah, which means servant of Yah, we note that this book is a condemnation of the Edomites, who are direct descendants of Esau. In verse 8, the men of Edom are coupled with those in the mountains of Esau. The prenatal prediction that 2 nations were in Rebekah's womb were correct. Who could have seen that the one nation would fight and war against the other to the point of destruction? Edom, who thought they were incapable of being defeated, would be destroyed because they refused to come to Israel's aid and in fact took advantage of Israel in her weakest moments. Because she helped those who would destroy Israel, the book of Obadiah is devoted solely to the demise of the Edomites, direct descendants of Esau. Servant of Yah, Obadiah, servant of Yah. And all throughout this text, Jacob keeps defining himself as the servant of Esau. I'm your servant, I'm your servant, I'm your servant. And yet we get to the book of Obadiah, it's the Edomites, ironically Obadiah, servant of Yah, and it's the Edomites that are destroyed by God. All right. Any questions or comments on that? Where we're at? All right. I want to finish up bottom of the page. I have suggested in the past that we should not think, we didn't read the book of Yaakov, Jacob, James. I've suggested in the past that we should not think of the book of Yaakov as James, but it should return it to its Hebraic name of Yaakov. The tie-in between the book of Obadiah and Yaakov, along with our Torah text, is the ideas of servant. Throughout the Torah text today, Yaakov refers to himself as the servant of Esau. We just noted that Obadiah means servant of Yah, and the opening to Yaakov calls him a servant of God. Throughout the past narratives, we have watched as Yaakov struggles to answer the question of who he will serve. Will he serve himself or will he serve the living God? That is the question that all of us must answer at some point along the way. If a book of the Bible or an opening description with your name attached were published, would it say of us that we were servants of God, or would it read differently? Do our actions, the words we speak, and the life we lead bespeak one who serves the Lord, or one who lives for self? That is the question that must govern our lives daily. There's the question. Do our actions, the words we speak, and the life we lead bespeak one who serves the Lord, or one who lives for self? Go back to the first page, and let's underline something that was said there. Well, I wanted to go back to it just a second here. Hold on. Let me find it just 1 second here. I'm not going to find it. That's okay. All right. I'll leave it. Yes. I'm losing it. That's okay. Where's it at? Thank you. And you underlined it. There it is. Without a complete reliance on our God, we will inevitably misread the situation in our lives and live in fear of the future. Without a complete reliance on our God. This is on top of page 2. There it is. They may have gotten missed. They may have gotten misturned around in stapulation. Backside of the first page. Which should be page 2, yes. Where it says, it's the first paragraph on that page, and it says, it opens with nearing the land where Esau is now living. Then if you skip down to the middle of that paragraph, it says, without a complete reliance on our God, we will inevitably misread the situation in our lives and live in fear of the future. In other words, the only way to have reliance, the only way to read to what's going to happen in the future is to have reliance upon God in the present. If you don't have reliance upon Him in the present, you won't be able to interpret the future. And that comes from obedience. Yes?
And it seems like when we are living in fear, we tend to think we can help God.
Right.
Kind of like Yaakov, when he's like, okay, I'm going to put my beloved wife and child in the bath to make sure they're safe.
Right.
Not relying that God said him.
Right. Decisions that are made out of fear will inevitably demonstrate selfishness, because it's self-preservation. Whereas if you're, yeah.
And instead, all he got was really angry sons who ended up selling off his child into a slave.
Yeah, Jacob is like all of us in this respect. There's some times where you see him elevate to heights of godliness, and then at times plummet to places where you say, how in the world could that be? You know, he does this. Instead, you'd like to see more of the, an upward trend. But he's not that way all the way through this. We know what I think. What that says, though, is this to me. One of the things that's profound about this is that despite all the imperfections of our humanity, God remains faithful to the covenant. This ultimate plan He has at the redemption of man is that no matter our unfaithfulness, and then the profound aspect of that is that He's able to use our unfaithfulness to accomplish His plan. Yeah. All right. We'll close it off there.